universal water metering, and that would allow you to tie your fees to actual cost of provision and an indirect proxy for the amount of sewage that would be generated, deducting for car washing and lawn watering. I don't believe that it appears anywhere in the 15-year financial plan for the city to implement universal water metering. I think that's a future consideration, Mr. Thomas. It's not in the plan in any future year.
No, in fact, Your Worship, we have a document that was, I believe it was accepted by council from 2012 or 13 that actually says that we won't water meter. I think we have, so we won't go to universal water metering, I think was the recommendation from that. We have in the water regulation bylaw the authority to meter properties at the discretion of staff, which is challenging. It's certainly simpler on a new building because the infrastructure is quite complicated to put into an existing commercial building or industrial building. There is also the requirement in either in the water bylaw or the building bylaw to be meter ready on all residential properties that are built, and I'm not sure whether that's happening or not. It's definitely in the bylaw. From my perspective, we've had some conversations internally, and I think there are some properties in town that are probably suited to being on a metered rate rather than the city estimating larger volumes of water for activities that we don't have a good record of how they're using the water. However, the cost of installing meters, whether it's residential meters or larger meters, also plays a large factor into what decisions we would make on that. This is certainly a much bigger conversation for another day where we will probably be bringing something forward in the next year or so to really try and work out the most equitable way of determining water rates. I think metering is common across Canada. BC has one of the lowest rates of metering, I think, in Canada, and we're kind of catching up. I think it's a challenge.
Your Worship, I just wanted to say further with respect to meters, more and more we're starting to see senior government grants being tied towards a long-term direction to implement water metering to address climate change primarily. Mr. Thomas is right, as 86% of Canada's municipal water supply is already metered. For some reason, there's this resistance in the West to the concept and the belief that it increases the cost beyond the cost of installing and maintaining a meter, the belief that the water is free. The water that we put in the disinfection, transmission, distribution network is free. Nature gives us that. But water is probably a municipality's most capital-intensive infrastructure. It's not cheap. And the focus for communities like Revelstoke with old infrastructure has been reducing non-market, non-revenue water, which is water lost from leaks in your distribution network. And that being a higher priority than metering in a lot of communities. When I was in Fernie, we estimated the non-revenue water loss was about 60%.
Councilor,
I think we all agree the infrastructure is going to be a top priority over the next term. Increases in rates, though, are always tricky, and it's going to be passed on to the end user. 10%. What has been done in the past? What did we put in last year? Was there an increase in the rates for last year, or in the last couple of years?
5% in 2018. I believe it was 5% the year before, but I.
So confusing the DCCs with the rate increases seems to me that's part of the confusion with everyone here. We've been saying, okay, because the DCCs weren't implemented, we're in a desperate situation. We need to pass it on through rate increases, but we do need the increases regardless. So, and I agree.
Yeah. So it's not a major increase, but it's an increase nevertheless, and so we need to go forward with that. So I'm going to ask, is there any further discussion on the fees and charges bylaw? Councillor Kratz.
Your Worship, I would just at this point state that I can see the need here, and I'm probably going to support this motion at this point, but I'm doing so on the clear, I'm going to make a clear statement that come the budget, I won't be supporting any tax increases unless a DCC process is clearly on the table before I have to approve that. That's just my position on this. It's patently unfair for taxpayers to be having more money charged to them without the DCC issue or a clear process for getting it resolved, sorted out. That's our city's money. It's been years since it was dealt with. It needs to be dealt with. And whatever, surely we can find pretty good bylaw. It needs tweaking. We need more engagement. We need to make those tweaks to make that more palatable for those parties. But to me, to suggest it's that expensive, I just don't buy it. However, I will vote in favor of this motion after listening to your intelligent comment on it and the city staff's comment on it. I'm just sending a strong signal that I'm doing so only on the basis and understanding that the DCCs come back as a clear process before we finalize a budget.
Well, Councillor Cross, your statement will be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. I will not defend or push away that statement in any degree. I'll just let you know that that's reflected in the minutes. Mr. Chabot.
Just to
Thank
note,
you,
Your
Worship.
Worship, there's a motion on the floor to read a bylaw. The minutes will not reflect discussion and debate. They aren't answered. Certainly the audio recording, the live streaming of the meeting will make clear to anyone who wants to look back on statements made and commitments made, but it won't be reflected in the minutes.
Thank you for that clarification. So any further discussion on the fees and charges bylaw? Okay, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 9B. Someone may make the motion, Big Eddy Water Local Service Area Parcel Tax.
I can bring that
Councilor
forward.
Brooks-Hill.
That the Big Eddy Water Local Area Service Parcel Tax Bylaw number 2241 be read a first, second, and third time.
Is there a seconder for that motion, Councillor Sherlatt? Any discussion on that motion? I think this is dealing with the taxation on the individual parcels, Big Eddy owners, and the way that the water service is put forward. Is that correct, Mr. Chabot?
It is, Your Worship. These are works and debt that was contracted based on a petition from those liable to be specially charged for the service. This came part and parcel with a 2/3 grant towards water system upgrades in the Big Eddy, funded by federal and provincial governments. Not sure if anyone has any question in regards to how the formula for calculating the fee reflected in the bylaw actually works. It's a little bit complicated. I understand it in sort of vague generalities, but Mr. Thomas has 3 short slides that he could show council if they were interested to see it in action. It's creative. It's a blended approach.
You have an appetite for that?
No, I'm just going to say I've done the math. It seems completely reasonable. It's a good city staff report on this item. It's a big expense. It seems well put together and well dialed from my point of view.
Any other further discussion on this?
General curiosity, how did the project go? Did it go on budget? Did it reach the numbers it was supposed to? Or?
Mr. Thomas?
Your Worship, we've got 2 projects here. Which one are we talking about first?
Big Eddy Water.
The Big Eddy, we're still underway. So we are in, I guess it's year 2 of construction, and we still have, we're just finishing some work right now. We're doing some logging up on the hill above Highway 23. We've been working on the wells. We did some distribution piping work in the Big Eddy. Most of the distribution work, I think, is done that we intended to get done. We still have to build a reservoir next year, so that's another big piece there. So that'll be a separate contract from what we're doing right now. And we've got to build the pipeline, a new pipeline up to the reservoir. So that's the purpose of the logging that we're doing as well. So there's, I think we're still within budget, but we may not get everything done that we wanted to get done because, so we don't want to exceed the budget. So basically, because we have the grant money and the money from the local area service, we don't have any extra money than that. The Big Eddy water system doesn't have, they don't have $1 million in reserve. I'm not sure, I don't want to put Ms. McCabe on the spot, but they definitely don't have $1 million in reserve. If they did, we could potentially have council make a decision to continue this project, to do some of that work. We don't have that money, so when our budget is done, we're planning on being done the work, and so we're very cautious about our next steps because we're reaching the end of our budgeted amount. So over the next couple of months, we'll be gently asking, contractors, how much do you think this is going to cost, and really piecing out the work so that we fit within the budget.
I was just going to ask Mr. Thomas, you had mentioned like extra steps, but within the budget, everything that needs to be done will be done. What's the difference between the extra things that you're...
So, Your Worship, we got this grant back in 2014,
Yep.
I think it was, maybe. Yeah, and it was certainly, I think we applied for it in 2014. 4 or 5 years later, we're now looking at cost increases. The cost of construction in this area of the world has gone up like pretty significantly over those years. So we're, we may be around 10%. If we wanted to do everything, it might have cost us 10% more, something like that. So we've prioritized the works to get the best benefit out of the project. All along, there was always this last phase I think it had 7 phases in the original consultant's plan. And the 7th phase was like general pipe upgrades that we were hoping to get done, but we weren't sure that we'd ever get them done. So those are things that weren't critical to get the fire flows up, to get the capacity up overall, but would have been the nice to haves afterwards, the distribution pieces that they will need to get done in the next 20 to 40 years. I'm not sure the actual time frame. We're going to work that out too. But they weren't mission critical to the whole Big Eddy system. Whereas getting this pipeline up to the reservoir and increasing that capacity and putting another reservoir in truly does increase the resiliency of that system. So those are the last pieces that we want to get done.
Mr. Thomas, Mr. Elliott.
So the parcel taxes that the residents of the Big Eddy will receive is dependent on the final tally, final expenses, no?
Other way around, so we're actually limiting our final expenses
By
what the parcel tax and the grant covers. We're doing our best to keep within that. We may have to come to council and say, there's this one piece that we need to do. Can we have authority to do that? And there may be some, maybe you need to do that. Maybe it's something that we'll, defer for a couple of years. But we want to, so the other part of it is we actually want to maximize every dollar out of the grant that we receive. We've got 2/3 funding. We don't want to leave any money on the table if we can avoid it. So there's competing demands there. And the longer we wait to use it, we start reaching, I can't remember if this grant was a 10-year grant program, which seems ridiculous, the amount of time that you have to complete these, considering how much costs can go up over that time. But it's also afforded us the opportunity to piece this out into relatively, large enough but not too large pieces of work. So we've had, some great contractors working on this for us, and I think generally the work has gone really well.
Thanks, Mr. Thomas. Any further discussion on this motion? All right, so I'm going to ask the question on this. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Going to move on to item 9C. Thomas Brook, does someone care to bring that motion forward, please?
Sure.
Councilor Cross.
That the Thomas Brook Water and Sewer Local Area Service Parcel Tax Bylaw number 2242 be read a first, second, and third time.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councilor Rind. Any discussion on this motion? This is similar to what you just approved for the Big Eddy Water, only for the Thomas Brook Water, which is up around the ski hill area.
River roads too. Sewer and roads too.
Sewer and roads too as well. Yes, Councillor Cross.
Your worship, just a question of interest, which may not be appropriate for the motion, but Thomas Brook obviously is having lots of issues with sanitary conditions of the water. Could we get a report from yourself or city staff on what's being done about that while we're on the topic of spending more money on Thomas Brook or approving expenditure on Thomas Brook?
Are you talking about the creek issue up there? Is that
Yes.
what you want to discuss? We're aware of that issue. That will probably fall more to the environmental people than to us. We've definitely been made aware. I get phone calls on a regular basis from residents up there saying it's here again. And I believe Mr. Thomas and Mr. Chabot are getting those phone calls and emails as well. So at this point in time, because it's a provincial matter, I'm not sure that we can do anything.
Okay.
Yeah, Your Worship, I don't know if Mr. Thomas has anything further to provide. We've certainly been encouraging the Ministry of Environment to become more actively engaged in seeing that this issue is resolved.
Your Worship, I just spoke to them 5 minutes before this meeting. I've been attempting to call this one gentleman. I ended up talking to someone else. We expect to have a report back from them in the next week or so. I know he was planning on working on it and discussing it with his supervisor this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So within the next week, I should have some more information on this. At the moment, it's as Mr. Chabot mentioned, it's a provincial matter that's we're encouraging the province to take the appropriate action on this. And my comments to the province was that we want to work collaboratively with them. If there's any anything that we need to work with them on, we'll definitely be prepared to assist them, whether that's through our own regulations or the skills that we have on staff. I think we all just want to see the issue get resolved.
Thanks, Mr. Thomas. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? Thomas Brook Water and Sewer Local Area Service Parcel.
Worship, I just had a quick question through you for Ms. McKee. Just because I had heard this in the community, I wasn't sure if it was true. Was there any issue with people not paying? Like not, pardon me?
Participating in?
Yeah, like refusing to come forward and pay the monthly issue or the yearly payment or anything?
No, we haven't actually charged anyone for it yet, and that's the reason for the bylaw, so that for next year, those that didn't, everyone was given a chance to pay it up front, and those
Right.
that chose not to, then they're choosing the annual option.
And we'll just place that on.
It'll just go into the property tax.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
that's good. Any further discussion? Councillor Elliott?
We're complete at this point?
Mr. Thomas?
Your Worship, there's a guardrail being installed this week, I believe, and that is pretty much the end of the project. I think everything else is complete. The water and sewer has been complete for a while, and yeah, we've just got, at one culvert, we've got some guardrail work to just tidy that up and make it safe.
Anything further? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Carry on to 11A, staff reports. All of you were in the room earlier with Community Forest Corporation meeting and Revelstoke Community Energy Corporation. So I'm going to ask someone would bring forward this motion, 11A. Somebody want to read this for me?
Sure.
Councillor Cross.
They're all so long. The motion is that council approve that effective on the retirement of the following directors at the 2018 Annual General Meeting of Revelstoke Community Forest Corporation, known as RCFC Holding Company Limited, Bill Beard, Jim Blake, Mark McKee, Lonnie Parker, Trevor English, Connie Brothers, Aaron Orlando, that the city hereby appoints the following individuals as directors of the company for a term to expire at the next AGM, Annual General Meeting of the company, or until their successors are elected or appointed, subject to the provisions of the articles of the company. Bill Beard, Jim Blake, Gary Souls, Lonnie Parker, Rob Elliott, Jackie Ryan, Stephen Cross.
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Elliott. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. 11B, please. Someone want to read that for me? Councilor Broxhill?
Is that me?
Yes.
That council approve that effective on the retirement of the following directors at the 2018 annual general meeting of Revelstoke Community Energy Corporation: Chantel Wilson, Alan Chabot, Mark McKee, Linda Nixon, Gary Souls, Bart Larson, James N.
McMahon.
McMahon? The city hereby appoints the following individuals as directors of the company for a term to expire at the next annual general meeting of the company or until their successors are elected or appointed, subject to the provisions of the articles of the company: Chantel Wilson, Alan Chabot, Gary Souls, Cody Younger, Michael Brooks Hill, Bart Larson, and James McMahon.
Can I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Elliott. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. On to 11C. There's a motion there. Someone, Councillor Charlotte.
The council policy F7, credit cards dated November 13th, 2007 be rescinded, and that council policy F7, credit cards dated November 27th, 2018 be approved.
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Elliott. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Elliott.
One of the items on there was credit card use for tax, major transactions through the city. Did I read that the fee was rescinded or reduced? You can use your credit card for
Okay.
You can use your credit card for transactions in the city with the exclusion of property taxes and utilities. And then what we're doing is, we used to have a daily limit of $5,000 on those transactions, which created a bit of an administrative nightmare for the staff, and so we'd like to remove that. We also had a restriction when Visa and MasterCard debit cards first came out. We were being charged by the merchant, a merchant fee on those, and so we included them as a restriction for paying property taxes and utilities with them. We couldn't pay them. We're now removing that so that people with Visa and MasterCard debit cards, mainly CIBC clients and TD clients, will be able to use those Visa MasterCard debit cards to pay for those. But we're introducing a convenience fee on credit card transactions over $500. 10, 15 years ago, you weren't allowed to do that with credit card transactions. As a vendor or as a merchant, you couldn't charge your customers to take a credit card. You are now allowed to do that, so we're going to be doing that. Because unfortunately, the volume of the fees that we're paying for credit cards is going to get more expensive over time, not as people are allowed to use them.
Any further discussion on the motion? Any questions? So you can now pay your property tax with your credit card.